Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Babby and this is my presentation on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this service was first founded in 1871 and was known as the U.S. Commissions of Fish and Fisheries. Since then it's undergone several name changes until now becoming the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service we know it as. So originally it was founded to find out why fish populations and fisheries were declining off coast and inland waters, and more importantly, how to solve this problem. The federal government recognized this problem, and as I'll mention later, it's both managed federally and at a state level for each state to manage their own populations, and then the federal government as a whole when it comes to protecting land and that sort of thing. A couple important dates I picked out were in 1872, the National Fish Hatchery System was first opened. It now runs a network of 70 hatcheries, which is really important because this helps protect endangered species and is also vital to restocking ponds and rivers and keeping up fish populations as a whole. After that, land and animals started to become protected as well. In 1956, the Fish and Wildlife Act was passed, which just granted even more protection to fish and wildlife. In 1973 was the same thing. The Endangered Species Act allotted even more protection. This covered land, animals, and fish. And then most recently in 2020, the Great American Outdoors Act allots the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is the fund that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service draws from, the highest possible amount of $900 million annually, which then again still goes to protection, conservation, and enforcement. The purpose of this service is to protect and conserve, and then actually educate as well the public on fish, wildlife, and plants. This is done through the managing of the National Fish Hatchery. As I mentioned before, just helps keep fish populations up, stocking ponds, rivers, that kind of thing. And then enforcement as well. They have enforcement officers that are allowed to cover a gun, or that are allowed to carry a gun. They're allowed to make arrests. They make sure that people aren't hunting during the off season. They help manage permits and regulations, enforce fishing regulations, make sure fish isn't like too big or too small, that you're catching the right type of fish. And then lastly, conducting programs as well to just educate the public about what they're doing and why they're doing it. The structure of this, it's not a cabinet level department or agency. It falls under the U.S. Department of Interior, which is a cabinet level. It's run by the federal and state governments. The states manage each state's native populations, their endangered animals, because it's easier for a state to know more about their ecology than the federal government, although the federal government helps more with land preservation, allotting money, that kind of thing. It falls under each state's executive branch, which I thought was interesting because they do have law enforcement officers, which is probably where that comes from. And then Martha Williams is the current director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Some job requirements. You do have to be a U.S. citizen for whatever job you apply for. There are clerical and administrative positions, technical and medical, administrative and management, professional and scientific, and of course, internships available. The internships, you just need a high school diploma. The clerical and administrative, as well as the technical and medical, you don't necessarily need an education. You just have to be able to pass proficiency tests regarding whatever job you're applying for. So if this is to be an administrator, you have to be able to pass like a typing test, have limited errors. Each specific job has its like own niche requirements, but as a general, that's what it is. They do break each job down into different levels according to like how intense the requirements are, how much education you're going to need. So GS1 is the lowest and it goes up to GS7 and then it just says and beyond. So I'm not sure how much higher you can get, but GS1 for the clerical and administrative, at least, you don't need educational requirements, just be able to pass that test, However, under administrative and management, as well as the professional and scientific, the minimums for those jobs are that you need at least a bachelor's degree, and then you also need a lot of experience. In my opinion, I do believe this service is effective. They've done a lot to help protect our endangered animals. When we hear about endangered animals coming off of the endangered animals list, this is in a large part due to the Fish and Wildlife Service. We give them a lot of money. There's a lot of land to protect, and there's a lot of intricate species that are vital to our environment, our ecology, the full circle. The fish hatcheries are really important. Those help protect the endangered animals. They allow people to continue fishing, make sure we have enough of each fish. The law enforcement is active. They enforce these regulations and laws that we make. I actually believe there's a TV show for them, kind of similar to Cops, but a U.S. Fish and Wildlife version of it. Permits and regulations, keep hunting at a minimum, help make sure we have the right number in each population. I do think we could still do more, especially when it comes to pesticides and pollution from large companies. However, that comes down more to making laws. It's not something that the law enforcement officers themselves can handle. It's a little higher than that. Although, another thing I didn't add on the slides is we could still do more about animal trafficking. That's become a larger problem lately, and it's still something we're working to fight. And this is my works cited. Thank you for listening.